ready? Am I timer? Affirmative team? Yeah. All right. Let's begin. In this final negative speech of today's debate round, we're going to be boiling down the round and condensing it into a few key voting issues. A few reasons that I would ask you to vote against the affirmative team's plan and vote for the status quo instead. We'll be seeing through these voting issues that the affirmative team's plan really is not justified in today's debate round, and the most beneficial way to vote will be a negative ballot. Let's go down to those voting issues. Voting issue 1 is no threat. No threat. Now we're going to have two subpoints under this voting issue. Subpoint A is no use. No use. Now, as my partner and I have continuously said throughout today's debate round, the United States and Russia currently do not use cluster munitions. We're not actually using them in the moment at the status quo. So there's no actual reason to put this ban in place, especially because the cluster munitions can be useful when we do need them. The only thing is we don't need them right now. Voting this subpoint B is clearance. Clearance. Now what's interesting is that the affirmative team actually failed to respond to this in their last speech. They didn't directly respond to my partner's point that the United States and Russia currently have to clear all cluster munitions from fields after they use them. My partner talked about this point in his last speech, and the affirmative team failed to directly respond to this. And in debate we have a saying that silence equals acceptance. The affirmative team, in not arguing against this point, accepts that it is true. And given the next speech is the last speech of the round, it's too late for them to respond. I ask you to disregard any new responses or anything that hasn't been heard yet in the last speech, given we wouldn't be able to respond to it, and that's abusive to the negative team. So we've seen that the affirmative team, through not directly responding to our point, that cluster munitions are cleared and that there's no threat, there is no reason to vote for their plan, because there's absolutely no harm in the current system. Sure, in the past it may have been a certain way with cluster munitions, but in the status quo, as of the evidence my partner and I read, we have to clear the cluster munitions from the fields, and there is no threat. Therefore, there's no reason to enact the affirmative team's plan. Let's go to voting issue 2 of Russian refusal. Russian refusal. Now the affirmative team came up and said that we haven't read any evidence about cluster munitions, and that we haven't read about how the current trust of the relationship is affecting that. However, we did a bit of analysis here. The affirmative team's evidence they read about how Russia would ratify such a treaty was from 2009, when the relationship was very strong given the reset button. However, in more recent weeks, the relationship has come apart a bit. There's not much trust in the relationship right now. Thus, we have to ask ourselves, would Russia really accept something that the United States would try to force them to do? The answer is no. In the status quo, and under the affirmative plan, Russia does not trust us. Russia doesn't want to do what we want them to do. Russia doesn't actually trust us at the moment. And under the affirmative plan, you wouldn't actually see Russia ratifying the treaty. This means that an affirmative ballot is not justified simply because Russia won't follow through. Russia won't actually ratify the treaty. If you were to vote affirmative, you would get none of their benefits that they specify because Russia wouldn't ratify the treaty. Therefore, civilians, if they come up and claim that civilians are still going to die, they would die under affirmative anyways, because Russia is not going to ratify this treaty. They don't trust us at the moment. At the moment is the wrong time to ratify this treaty, given Russia does not trust us. Let's go to voting issue 3 of a governmental shutdown. Governmental shutdown. We'll be looking more at the current system of why the affirmative team's plan is a hasty policy. Now, they had a few responses. First, they talked about how I somehow conceded in cross-examination. I didn't concede that we could spend without having a governmental shutdown. I conceded that we could spend, but I said that it was a bad idea, an extremely bad idea. Spending more at the moment will lead to a governmental shutdown. I didn't concede this point at all in the cross-examination. If you were to vote for the affirmative team's plan, you'd be voting for blind spending. We still don't know how much their plan is going to cost, how much getting these new kind of weapons is going to cost. No evidence from the affirmative under this point, and it's much too late for them to bring it up in the round now, given we wouldn't be able to look at that evidence. The affirmative team hasn't provided you with that evidence. If you were to vote for their plan, you'd be voting for blind spending in a time where our economy is in extreme crisis and we are facing a governmental shutdown. It is the wrong time to vote for the affirmative team's plan. At this time, we need to be conserving money as much as possible. Even a few months could make a world of difference. The affirmative team's plan cannot be done today. It cannot be done right now. Even if we were to delay the plan for a few months or a year, it would make a much better difference given we would have a much more stable economy. And my voting issue 4 is military undermined. Military undermined. The current system is working. It's using cluster munitions. The only reason that it's not using them currently is because we don't need them. But the evidence said that the Department of State says that they are useful in the future and will actually help to save the lives of United States soldiers. The current system is great. The current system has cluster munitions that save lives. The affirmative team's plan cannot be enacted now. The governmental shutdown will happen if you vote for them, just because you voted for it right now. I ask you to delay this plan, to actually put it off, because first of all, there's no reason for it. Russia won't accept it. It will cause a governmental shutdown, and the current system is solving and is great as it is. Thank you. I ask you to vote negative.